You're lying in bed. It's 11 p.m., you're exhausted. And then you remember, Sarah texted you 8 hours ago and you never responded. Your stomach drops. Not because it was urgent, it wasn't. Not because she's mad, she's definitely not. She sent you a meme about a dog. But now, in the dark, under your blanket, you feel like a terrible person. You mentally draft and redraft an apology for a crime that doesn't exist. Sorry, crazy day. No, too defensive. Just saw this. No, too casual. You're workshopping your defense for a trial that's never going to happen. Or here's another one. You're at a coffee shop. You brought your laptop. You bought a single drip coffee. Nothing else. You've been here for 3 hours. The barista hasn't even looked at you. There's a dozen empty tables. And yet you feel like you're stealing. Like you're some kind of cafe burglar, pilfering their precious oxygen, squatting on their chair like a freeloader. So you buy a second coffee you don't want just to quiet the guilt. Here's the thing. You've done nothing wrong. Not ethically, not socially, not by any reasonable standard. And you know that. But you feel guilty anyway. Why? By the end of this video, you're going to understand why your brain has a guilt button that someone else keeps pressing. Even when there's nobody in the room, let's be clear about what we're talking about here, because guilt is one of those words that gets used to describe 17 different feelings. We're not talking about actual guilt, the kind you feel when you lie to someone you love or break a promise or hurt someone on purpose. That guilt makes sense. That's your conscience doing its job. We're talking about the other kind, the phantom guilt. The guilt that shows up when you say no to an invitation and feel like a monster. Someone gives you a gift and you panic because you didn't get them one. You take a sick day, even though you have a fever, you leave a party early. You're happy when someone else is sad, even though their sadness has nothing to do with you. You succeed at something and feel bad because others didn't. It's guilt without a crime, guilt without a victim. It's your brain's smoke detector going off because you made toast. And here's what makes it so strange. Most emotions have a pretty obvious off switch. You're scared? Remove the threat. You're angry? Resolve the conflict. You're sad? Process the loss, give it time. But false guilt? You can't logic your way out. You know you didn't do anything wrong, and it doesn't matter. The feeling stays. You wouldn't design a system this way. If you were building a brain from scratch and someone said, hey, let's make them feel terrible about imaginary transgressions they didn't commit, you'd call security. And yet here we are. Every human being on the planet walking around with a guilt mechanism that has, to put it generously, a very sensitive trigger. So where did this come from? Let's say you're living about 50,000 years ago, somewhere in what's now southern Africa. You're part of a band. That's the anthropology term for it. About 30 people, maybe 40 if it's been a good year. A mix of families, kids, elders. You've known every single one of them your entire life. And here's the thing about your band. It's everything. It's your economy, your military, your healthcare system, your entertainment, your retirement plan. If you get kicked out, you die. Not eventually, soon. You can't hunt a kudu by yourself. You can't defend yourself from a leopard. You can't survive a broken leg alone. The band is not optional. The band is life. So now, picture this. It's late dry season. Food's been tight for weeks. Yesterday, a few of the hunters managed to bring down an impala. Not huge, but enough. The meat gets distributed, like always. Everyone gets a share. But you messed up. You weren't trying to take more than your share. You were hungry, distracted. But when you look at the meat left over, it's clear. You took too much. Not catastrophically. Not enough that anyone's going to starve tonight, but enough that people noticed. And here's where it gets interesting, because what happens next is all happening inside your body automatically. Your stomach tightens. Your face gets hot. You can't meet anyone's eyes. This is shame. The external version, the I've been seen feeling. But right behind it comes the second wave. Guilt. The internal one. The one that doesn't need an audience. Even if no one says a word to you, you feel bad. Not just scared of punishment, not just worried about consequences. You feel like you did something wrong and you need to fix it, so here's what you do. You self-punish. You give back some of your portion. You volunteer for the worst job tomorrow, hauling water, gathering firewood, whatever. You signal remorse. You make it clear through your actions that you know you screwed up and you're trying to make it right. And it works. The band forgives you. Not because they sat down and had a meeting about it, because your guilt did exactly what it was supposed to do. It repaired the social fabric before it tore. This is the evolutionary logic of guilt. It's a preemptive repair mechanism. Anthropologists and evolutionary psychologists generally agree that emotions like guilt, shame, and embarrassment evolved because they solved a very specific problem. How do you keep a group together when everyone's an individual with selfish impulses? You can't have a cop in every brain. You can't have a rule for every situation. So instead, natural selection built something cheaper. An emotional alarm system that goes off when you violate the group's expectations, even implicit ones. The technical term is self-conscious emotions: guilt, shame, embarrassment, pride. They all require you to model what others think of you, which means they require a pretty sophisticated social brain. You don't see guilt in lizards. You see it in primates and elephants, in some corvids, animals that live in complex social groups where reputation matters. And here's the key. The system is supposed to be oversensitive. Because in a world where getting exiled from your band means death, the cost of underreacting is way higher than the cost of overreacting. If you feel guilty about something that wasn't actually a big deal, fine. You apologize, you move on, minimal harm. But if you don't feel guilty about something that was a big deal, you might get kicked out. You might die. So your brain, shaped by thousands of generations of this math, learned to err on the side of caution. When in doubt, feel bad. Okay, so you've got this guilt system. It works. It keeps the peace. Everyone's cooperating, sharing, surviving. But then, slowly, things get more complicated. Fast forward about 40,000 years. Let's say you're now living around 10,000 BCE. Agriculture is just starting to spread in some places. Your group isn't 30 people anymore. It's more like 150. Maybe 200. You've got semi-permanent settlements, you've got property, stored grain, built structures, you've got more rules, and here's where guilt starts to do something new. It's not just about repairing harm anymore. It's about internalizing rules. When you were in a 30-person band, everyone knew the expectations because everyone was in constant contact. You didn't need to be told not to take more than your share. You could see the pile of food, see everyone watching, feel the social weight in real time. But now, you might be working in a field alone. You might be in a storage hut by yourself, no one's watching. And yet, you still don't steal the grain. Why? Because your parents, your elders, your culture, they got inside your head. They didn't just teach you the rules. They taught you to feel bad when you even thought about breaking them. This is internalized guilt. And it's incredibly powerful because it turns every human being into their own enforcer. You don't need a guard at the granary if everyone who walks by it has a little voice in their head saying, "That's not yours." But here's the complication. Once guilt becomes internalized, it stops being just about real harm. It starts attaching to whatever your culture decides is wrong. And cultures decide all kinds of things are wrong. Let's say you're a young woman in a Bronze Age farming community, around 3000 BCE, somewhere in the ancient Near East. Your family has arranged a marriage for you. You don't want it. You're in love with someone else. You haven't done anything. You haven't run away, haven't dishonored anyone. You've just been lying awake at night, thinking about a life you'll never have. And you feel crushing guilt, not because you hurt anyone, but because in your culture, even wanting something outside the plan, even feeling desire that doesn't align with your family's needs, that's a betrayal. That's selfish. That's wrong. Your guilt system, which evolved to stop you from stealing your neighbor's meat, is now punishing you for your private thoughts. This is the thing about guilt. It's a tool. And once it's built into your brain, it can be used by anyone who gets to define what good and bad mean. Parents use it. Religions use it. Governments use it. Cultures use it. And because the guilt feels the same, whether it's about real harm or arbitrary rules, your brain can't always tell the difference. You feel guilty for taking the last slice of pizza the same way you'd feel guilty for shoving someone down the stairs. Obviously, those aren't the same. But the emotional alarm, it doesn't come with a volume dial. Now let's jump again. You're in medieval Europe, let's say 1300 CE. You're a Catholic. You've been taught from birth that even thinking certain thoughts is a sin. Lust, envy, pride. You don't even have to act on these thoughts. Just having them puts your immortal soul in danger. So now you're guilty for your feelings. You're lying in your bed in your small village and you're thinking about the baker's wife, or you're feeling bitter that your brother inherited the farm, or you're proud that you built a nice chair, and immediately the guilt crashes down. You didn't do anything. You didn't sleep with the baker's wife, didn't steal from your brother, didn't brag about your chair, but you feel like a sinner. Because guilt, at this point, has been completely unmoored from behavior. It's now policing your interior life, and here's the kicker. This actually works. From a social control perspective, a population that feels guilty for thoughts they can't control is a population that's constantly seeking forgiveness, constantly trying to atone, constantly reinforcing the power structure that defines what's sinful in the first place. It's brilliant, and it's brutal. But even outside of religion, this pattern continues, because guilt is socially contagious. You learn what to feel guilty about by watching what other people apologize for. If your mom always apologized for asking for help, you'll feel guilty asking for help. If your dad felt guilty every time he relaxed, you'll feel guilty relaxing. If your culture treats ambition in women as selfish, women will feel guilty for being ambitious. The guilt gets passed down generation to generation like a family recipe, except the recipe is for feeling bad. So now it's today. You're you, and you're living in a world your brain was absolutely not designed for. You're not in a 30-person band anymore. You're navigating hundreds of relationships, family, friends, coworkers, acquaintances, people you've met twice, people you only know online. Every single one of those relationships comes with expectations, and a lot of them contradict each other. Your job expects you to be available, responsive, always hustling. Your family expects you to be present, attentive. Your friends expect you to show up. Your partner expects emotional labor. Your parents expect phone calls. Your social media followers expect content. The world expects you to be informed, outraged, active, aware, and you're just trying to get through the day without crying in your car. But here's what your brain is doing. It's running that same old guilt algorithm, the one that was calibrated for a world where you had 30 people to keep happy and they were all you'd ever need. Except now you have 300 people to keep happy. Or 3,000 if you count everyone you've ever given your email address to. And your guilt system, bless its heart, is trying its best. It's firing every time you think you might have violated an expectation. Every unreturned text, every declined invitation, every boundary you set, every time you rest instead of producing, every time you feel happy while someone else is sad, even if that person is a stranger on the internet you've never met. It's not broken, it's just overloaded. Let's get specific, because this is where it lands in your actual life. You feel guilty for saying no to extra work, even when you're already burned out, because somewhere deep in your brain, refusing to help the tribe feels like abandoning them. You feel guilty when someone gives you a gift and you didn't get them one, because reciprocity was life or death in small groups. You track debts automatically, and being in debt feels dangerous. You feel guilty taking a sick day, even with a doctor's note, because in your ancestry, if you didn't contribute, you didn't eat. Rest had to be earned. You feel guilty when you succeed and your friend doesn't, because in zero-sum ancestral environments, your gain often was their loss. If you got more meat, someone else got less. But you're not splitting an Impala anymore. You got a promotion. That didn't take anything from them, but it feels like it did. You feel guilty for other people's emotions, even when you didn't cause them, because in a tiny interdependent group, everyone's emotional state was partly your responsibility. If someone was upset, you helped, you soothed, you fixed it, but now you can't fix your mom's loneliness, or your friend's marriage, or your coworker's burnout, and the guilt tells you that you should. And here's the really insidious one. You feel guilty for things completely outside your control. Someone's mad at you for a misunderstanding. You feel guilty even though you did nothing wrong. A global tragedy happens. You feel guilty that you're safe and comfortable while others suffer. You set a boundary. I can't talk right now, I'm overwhelmed. And someone reacts badly. You feel guilty for their reaction to your reasonable need. This is your smoke detector screaming at the toast, because your brain doesn't have a good way to distinguish between guilt because you harmed someone, accurate, useful, guilt because you violated an internalized rule that may or may not be fair, needs examination. Guilt because you failed to meet an impossible standard, distorted guilt because someone else is upset and you exist in proximity to that fact, totally irrational. It all triggers the same alarm. And because we're empathetic, socially wired animals, we feel that alarm in our bodies. The stomach drop, the tightness in your chest, the obsessive mental loop where you replay the interaction, looking for what you did wrong. You're not broken. You're not overly sensitive. You're a human being with a Pleistocene guilt system trying to navigate a world with global connectivity, infinite social comparison, 24-hour news cycles, and a culture that tells you that self-care is selfish and rest is laziness. Your guilt detector is doing exactly what it evolved to do. Scream at you anytime there's even a chance you violated a social contract. The problem is, you're now a party to 10,000 social contracts, most of them implicit, many of them contradictory. You can't win. But here's the thing, and this is important. Feeling guilty doesn't mean you are guilty. It just means your alarm went off, and once you understand that the alarm is supposed to be oversensitive, you can start to evaluate it instead of just obeying it. You can ask, did I actually harm someone? Did I violate my values or just someone else's expectations? Is this guilt protecting a relationship I care about? Or is it just protecting me from the discomfort of existing as a separate person with my own needs? Sometimes the answer is, yeah, I messed up, I should apologize. But a lot of the time, the answer is, this is phantom guilt. This is my brain trying to solve a social problem that doesn't exist. And you can say kindly to that part of yourself, thank you for trying to keep me safe, but I'm okay. I didn't do anything wrong. It won't make the feeling disappear instantly. Guilt's sticky, but it does give you a way to live with it without letting it run your life. Here's the part almost nobody talks about. Guilt is actually supposed to feel a little unfair. Because if it only fired when you definitely objectively did something wrong, it'd be useless. By the time you're certain you screwed up, the damage is done. Guilt's job is to fire early, to make you hypersensitive to even the possibility that you've hurt someone or violated the group's trust. It's a warning system, not a verdict. And in the world, it evolved for a world of small groups, face-to-face interactions, and high stakes. That hair trigger made perfect sense. But you don't live in that world anymore. You live in a world where you're bombarded with other people's needs, expectations, and emotions, most of which you have zero power to fix. So your guilt is going to go off a lot. For things you didn't do, for things you can't control, for wanting things, for resting, for being human. And the more you understand that this is a feature of the system, not a reflection of your morality, the freer you get. If this hit home, if you've ever apologized for something you didn't do or felt like a bad person for setting a boundary or lost sleep over someone else's feelings, then you're going to love the next one. Hit subscribe, because we're going deep on the stuff that makes you human and makes you feel crazy. And it turns out there's usually a reason buried about 50,000 years in the past. You're not defective. You're just running very old software in a very new world. And now you know why.